Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics Podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me, as always, is the Cerberus to my Clifford the Big Red Dog, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
This week we're talking about Neogi. So, Neogi are a creature that is more or less unique to TSR's Spelljammer universe. They are a basically sentient eel-spider hybrid. They have the body of a spider, the head of an eel, and they're, about the size of, anywhere from like a cat to a medium-sized dog. And they are pretty much universally hated, not just because they are horrible eel-spider hybrids, but also because basically their main bag is slave trade. And they fly through the crystal spheres of Spelljammer on their Spelljammer ships and collect races and sell them to other races. About the only other race that can tolerate them is the illithids, if that gives you any idea of their bedfellows.
If your best friends are illithids, then that's a big sign that something's wrong.
They are also commonly associated with Umberhulks, where you're basically not considered an adult Neogi until you have enslaved an Umberhulk, and then you ride it around like a mount.
And so, just to get this out of the way, my brain, at least immediately when I hear eels and Neogi, thinks of unagi, the sushi, which is freshwater eel. And I that can't be a mistake. I think that was somebody at TSR making a sushi joke.
I wouldn't be surprised. Now you've ruined unagi for me. Thank you.
So yeah, now I don't have a problem in theory with their sort of like eel spiderness. Like, that's a quality mashup monster, right? Like you take two gross things and put them together. Yeah. And
honestly, one of the better horrible hybrids out there.
Yeah. And they're not too big too, which I think gets us one thing about that you always have to worry about with scaling up insects is that you have problems of scale, that like you can't really have a 12-foot wide tarantula because like it wouldn't be able to hold itself up. But like a 3-foot tall spider, I think I could believe that.
My main question is like you're melding an invertebrate and a vertebrate together, and what does the anatomy of that look like?
I think that they're described as having a eel-like head, but I'm thinking maybe it's segmented, like armored.
Okay.
Like I'm thinking like the face of the cockroach from Men in Black, the first one.
Yeah.
Where he's got that, like he's kind of got like a whole neck thing going on.
Yeah.
So it's, and with like segments of skin or something on top of that. I think that could totally work.
What if he had like a caterpillar neck with like those little grabby paws?
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of gross. I like the little grabby paws. I also think that I'd like to lean more into the insect part of it.
Okay, yeah.
I think that instead of an eel mouth, that maybe you'd go for something more like the pedipalps, or the little jaw, like a mustache with muscles, like that's that'd be the direction I take them.
I hate that description, but it's amazing.
Okay, so in that case, the biology of them isn't that weird. Like they would just be big insects.
Yeah.
Which I think is a pretty reasonable, like from a strictly like biology standpoint, just having them be big insects, with a sort of prehensile neck kind of thing going on, totally works.
And everyone loves a big spacefaring insect race as an enemy type creature.
I'm really digging the idea of them being spacefaring too. Maybe they were a race that has actually like managed to evolve or happened to evolve to be well suited to space travel. Like there's a pretty good argument that vertebrates have some trouble in space, like developing. Like there's this whole theory about how if you like have humans born in space because they aren't under the effects of gravity, that their bones are going to grow wrong and stuff like that. And even just like a fully grown human going out into space into microgravity or zero gravity for an extended period of time creates a large amount of stress on their system because we rely on gravity both to like give us resistance training, which helps us build muscle. So we end up with lots of muscle atrophy, especially in our legs. But then also like that screws up the circulatory system as well, because we kind of expect muscles to help pump our blood. It's not all on our heart usually.
Yeah,
because like moving your legs causes blood to move through your extremities. So we vertebrates with our internal bones and like it might actually be badly suited for traveling in space. Whereas something like an invertebrate with an arthropod with its exoskeleton and inside it's basically just liquid. It's just a jelly that is riding around in a chitinous mech, basically. That actually might be like they may be able to survive in microgravity and develop more easily than humans might. So these guys might have been able to like sort of take off from their home planet and spread more quickly without so many like problems to overcome.
Interesting. I do really like the idea of like these just like spiders like crawling around the outside of a ship, just no spacesuit or anything. They're just working on their ship. One thing that arthropods and vertebrates don't have respiratory systems the same way we do. They basically just have like holes in their sides that allow air to diffuse directly into their blood. Book lungs.
What?
Book lungs.
So in that case, maybe that wouldn't be so badly damaged by exposure to vacuum. You know, maybe they can just sort of close those things off. And because they are basically walking around in armor anyway, like that might actually like be able to stand low pressures.
Yeah.
So they really might not need spacesuits.
I also like the idea that like if they did, like maybe they would like they don't do spacesuits so much as like they just make big like airtight sacks out of silk.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's cool. I like that.
And so you just got like these little like they basically do like you know how spiders will do ballooning, where they basically just create like a parasail and just go floating off to wherever. Like
and these guys can instead they can fill up these things and like walk around in them. That's cool.
Like little hamster balls full of spider eels.
The other thing I was also thinking about was that arthropods, because they have an external exoskeleton, the exoskeleton can't grow with them. So instead what they have to do is molt, where they shed their entire outer hard surface and then a new one they grow slightly bigger and a new one solidifies on their gooey surface. Like when they get out of it, they're just a floppy goo, and then they actually get some new armor, and that means that begs the question: what do they do with that old stuff? Maybe that's a building material that they use. Like maybe their initial tool making was always old exoskeleton material, that chitinous stuff.
Interesting, yeah.
So you could imagine a Neogi spaceship that is just a giant like collection of exoskeletons held together by silk.
Have you seen someone made like an action figure or a robot or something out of cicada husks? Oh
no, that's awful, and I must look it up right now.
That's immediately where my mind went. It's just, let me see if I can.
I typed cicada husk into my Google and it auto completed with sculpture. So obviously Google knows me pretty well.
Oh yeah.
Yes, this is exactly what we want. Yes, this is not an individual. This is a whole thing. Oh yeah, somebody made a xenomorph.
I just saw that. That's amazing.
And okay.
Awful.
Yeah. This is cool. This is totally what I'm imagining for these guys. They just sort of use their old husks to build stuff with.
I also like the idea that maybe there's like a danger to like molting like in space. Like if they try molting in space, they just kind of pop.
Yeah, because they expect their exoskeleton to keep them in. So they have to find a space with high pressure that they can actually do the molting in. And actually, if you've ever seen, this is a problem that's like people who keep spiders sometimes come up with, which is that the spider needs its to be unmolested while it's in its soft stage, because if it does it in too tight of a quarters and like can't properly extend its legs, then they'll harden in like a curled fashion.
Interesting.
Which causes them like problems.
Yeah.
So, but that also means is that maybe a particularly dedicated Neogi could like fashion themselves into a shape during the time when they're kind of soft, and then like prematurely molt after that in order to produce the things that they need in the shapes they need.
I could also see them like, because they're supposed to be like this just kind of foul spacefaring race, right? Like, what if they do it to each other?
Yeah, that you totally could. I was thinking maybe that I was kind of lean into the angle that they're disgusting and creepy looking, and that's why everybody hates them. But they're not like evil. Like they're just alien.
Sure, yeah.
I think that may be kind of cool. Just kind of gross. Like everybody really is off put by them, but they're not like actively evil.
Yeah. Okay.
Would be kind of interesting.
I mean, you could even have like the sort of collectivist mindset of like, like, okay, our bow has been damaged. Someone needs to be warped into this shape.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like the idea that they've, like to do it would be like really excruciating, but maybe they've got a way, like I said, to prematurely molt afterwards, so they're not like stuck in there forever until it would have to happen. And then it's just the sort of like self-sacrifice kind of thing. Like, well, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna build the patch for the ship and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's rad. So we're definitely leaning a little bit into that spider zone. One thing that we can't go too long into this discussion before we have to touch on the bizarre features of Neogi reproduction.
Oh yeah. Well,
one thing I do like about them is that they're a agendered, asex species. Like they reproduce asexually. I'm not super wild with the stock version, so let's run our audience through that.
So basically the process is like as a Neogi gets older, but in TSR's universe, they basically choose one of their old infirm Neogi, envenom him a bunch of times, where he basically just starts to swell up and balloon up, I guess being impregnated with venom.
Yeah.
And at some point they eventually burst into a bunch of Neogi that cannibalize each other. Yeah. To the point of, there just being a few left.
It's suitably horrific, but I'm not sure I'm totally, like, it seems such a weird, like, that it requires the younger ones to be around to result in parthenogenesis like that. Seems kind of strange. I guess one of the questions we do have is, do we think these are, like, they've got eggs essentially inside of them that need to be fertilized or not, or they would develop on their own? Or do we think that maybe it's something like budding maybe, or something along those lines?
I find it interesting that like the way they were describing it was specifically the venom that caused the reaction. Like either they've got the eggs already, or they're sort of like the eggs are in the venom maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of species out there that are basically able to have their eggs like develop, become fertile without actually requiring like any sperm or anything like that. That's not uncommon even in like quite complex vertebrates and stuff. I know lizards will do that. Maybe even crocodiles. Can crocodiles do that? I can't remember. But the venom is an interesting thing. Could they? Do you want to explore the idea that maybe they do it by like it's actually like not egg based at all? It's just like their goo basically, and so therefore if you like do weird things to the goo, that it'll start to reproduce basically.
Sure, yeah. That's always breaking away from the traditional mold is an interesting way.
Yeah. I'm thinking maybe like okay, so from the outside they definitely look like spiders. But maybe inside they're a bit more like not specialized inside. Like the goo that makes them up could be doing a lot of different things. They might have some of their neural tissue out in their arms. They might have some of their digestive system, in their head. They have lots and lots of little different microorgans is maybe the way I'm thinking of it.
I do like the idea that maybe they're like just kind of like a living chrysalid or chrysalis. Sorry, chrysalid is from
yes. Well, because chrysalis is chrysali are like when a caterpillar goes into a chrysalis, it like liquefies. It becomes a goo basically, and then makes that goo forms into the adult version, the moth, the butterfly, which is really weird. Apparently, even this is the weirdest part. They've done tests where they taught stuff. I don't know exactly what they taught a caterpillar to do or respond or whatever. And then we're able to test the subsequent butterfly adult form, and they seem to remember the thing that they had been taught from before. Which means the goo remembered, which is really weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the idea that the inside is sort of an undifferentiated material, or maybe it has, like I said, maybe it has like microorgans and stuff inside of it. And that means that, I kind of love the idea that rather than like envenoming each other and then it forming like the babies inside of the body, it's more about they can tear one of themselves apart and then have each one of those sections grow into a new Neogi.
Interesting. So they're more like sourdough starters than.
Yeah, a lot more like a sourdough starter, or like a lot of different kinds of plants will do that too, where they'll you can split them off and graft. Oh, grafting is a really interesting idea, because what if they need, like, you don't just take them apart and then like leave the goo out and it turns into a thing. You have to like build a new, like you have to take the exoskeleton apart and build eggs out of it with goo inside that then turn into Neogi.
Interesting.
Because they seem to be very like willing to sort of biohack stuff. That sounds cool to me. Okay, so in this case, in this scenario, maybe it's not that we've talked about how they have the ability to force their molt ahead of time.
Yeah.
So maybe when they're in the point where they're like, okay, the colony is getting quite big, or the ship is getting, our population is getting to the point where we would like to have more Neogi, they, like, one of them either volunteers or is designated as going to be the new, birth mother, whatever, I don't know what to call it. And they undergo a series of rapid molts very quickly, getting bigger and bigger. And like the other ones spend a lot of time and effort, like bringing it food to absorb, to get nutrients, until the point where it gets big enough that they are then able to split it apart into multiple small Neogi eggs that then essentially molt themselves into full-grown Neogi.
Okay.
I think that's rad.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
And so, okay, I like the biology of this idea. I love the idea of them being really well specialized towards space too. Like they still need to be tethered to some sort of like space stations or planets, because they'll need somewhere to do their molting business, as gross as it is. But that otherwise they're like, they could kind of fly off into the vacuum with just like literally like a skeleton ship that like doesn't have any pressure inside of it. Like it's just like barely holding together with silk and made of the dead Neogi, like their chitinous bodies.
Yeah.
That's super rad. Is there an angle that we can take on their association with slavery that isn't them just being slavers? Like, is there some version of that we could?
Well, the way they sort of phrase it in D&D is like basically like their whole world sort of focuses around either possessing something or being possessed.
Okay.
So like ownership is a big deal to them.
Okay. So,
as far as where we can go with that, it might be like more of like a territory type thing in their case, rather than people. It's just like they're trying to occupy space. Like,
yeah, I'm
loving the idea that they have like these, like they're building giant webs in space.
Yes, absolutely. That would be freaking rad. They might like, I'm trying to think about like
think you're going through like an asteroid field. It's just all meshed together with webs and stuff.
Yeah, that'd be super rad. I was thinking about how they might treat some other species as sort of like symbiotic to themselves, or like because they have a strong association with Umber Hulks in their original version, and maybe that's like Umber Hulks are big, like they're hulking creatures that don't have a lot going on upstairs, if I remember correctly. I didn't look.
They're basically giant bipedal bug brutes with.
Oh no, I think I might have it.
What's up?
They make, okay, so the original word for the Polish word for slave or forced labor is the word that is the root word for our word for robot.
Interesting.
Literally, the word robot comes from a play in Polish that was about like these artificially created creatures that would just work and work and work. So that's what the Neogi make. They make slaves, quote unquote, but they actually are producing robots like through their chitinous machinations.
Okay, that's cool.
Like they have come up with some sort of, like biological robot maybe is the way to put it. Like they're biohackers. They make these, they will put together like a chitinous form and then I guess fill it with some sort of goop.
So basically these are the insect Avas of this world.
Avas?
From Neon Genesis Evangelion, the big biological robots.
I will admit that I've seen like 2 episodes of Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I slept through most of the rest of them. And then
it's an acquired taste. I'll give you that.
I have it's one of those things where also you need to be paying attention to that show to like understand what's going on.
Yeah,
which I just absolutely was not doing. So I have no idea what's going on. I couldn't even remember what they were called.
To be fair, like most of my interest with that show was those giant weird ass mechs and less the story.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, like I guess yeah, they are the weird ass Avas.
Yeah, so giant bug mechs.
Yeah. Okay, so in that case, what I'm thinking is that the goo inside of the Neogi are, like I said, they're not. It's not completely undifferentiated. They do have like micro organs, organs like they might function a bit, or might in origin be a bit more like our mitochondria, where mitochondria are they are like entirely separate from humans. Like they were at some early point of animal production, of animal evolution, another organism, another single cell organism got into our cells and decided they liked it there and just stayed. And they have their own genome. What they reproduce separately than us, which is why you get all of your mitochondria from your mother, because you grow inside your mother's womb. There's no mitochondria in sperm. So and they have like they're important to us because they are what helps us process energy. Our life would be impossible without them, and similarly, their existence would be impossible without us. But they also kind of have one foot out the door on this whole like being part of of our organism thing. And so all of these various like I said, micro organs inside of the Neogi may be kind of similar, where like they've got their own genomes, they've got their own functions, and like they do things inside of the Neogi that are important for this whole for this colony creature to survive. But they're also a little bit like, you could totally yank one out of one Neogi and throw it in another, and it'd totally be cool with it. Like maybe that's one of the things they do. Like, crap, I need another micro stomach. Can I borrow one of yours? And like they just like, you know. Anyway,
worst cup of sugar from your neighbor ever.
But if they make a new quote unquote Neogi, maybe with a different form, maybe it's bipedal or something like that to differentiate it, and they don't give it enough of the thinky cells, they just give it like the digestion and movement organs and stuff like that. They can make one that is like capable of following orders but isn't able to think of itself. Like it's literally just like a robot. Like they can program it even. And then instead of finding other races and enslaving them, they are producing robots, which are then have to be controlled and programmed and stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that.
Maybe with the help of, I guess you could also put in like a some sort of magical item or something in there if you want to make it a little bit less completely biological, make them a little bit more cyborgy.
No, I'm good with the biological horror.
Yeah.
But like I love the idea that like they're basically like sort of, they built these Ember Hulks to sort of act as their hands. Like 'cause if we're sticking with like where it is written, like they're only like the size of like house cats or dogs.
Yeah.
They're not that
3
big.
feet tall. Yeah.
So like to do like the heavy lifting and whatnot, like they need like these kind of, they need like this, it's basically like their power armor.
Yeah. They work like robots, right? Like we're going to build a 10-foot tall thing that can haul big items around and act as a defense system for us and stuff. But similarly, we don't imbue it with the full Neogi sentience because we need it to be a tool, not another member of the colony. In fact, maybe that comes from something that happened in their past. Like maybe they had been originally making fully sentient other Neogi creatures that were shaped in different ways. And what they found was maybe like if you start introducing those kinds of differences to the population, then the population starts fragmenting. Like, you make a Hulk and the Hulk decides, well, me and all the other Hulks, we're getting a raw deal out of all of this. You make us work all the time and we don't get any other reward. And so then they, revolt and they become a separate species and like they go to war, you end up with a civil war. So instead they're creating these, what's the word? These like
automatons or
non-sentient versions of these robots so that they can instead of like making new instead of making new citizens, they're making just tools, maybe they even build them in with something like a lifespan or something like that, where they're not going to reproduce. They're not going to live to be, 50 years old or something like that. They're going to run for a year and then they're going to wear out,
So one of the footnotes that I was reading basically on the Neogi is like their original home world was like, or succumbs to like clockwork horrors.
Oh, geez. Which we backwards wrote ourselves into.
Yeah. Well, I also like the idea that like maybe that like they were sort of like the first to basically experience whatever the Spelljammer equivalent of the Borg is.
Yeah. And maybe either there's two ways to go on that. One is they created the clockwork horrors, but they're biological clockwork that then overtook them. Or possibly they saw the way the clockwork horrors worked and said, ooh, we can learn from that.
I actually really like that second idea. Like,
yeah. That they were pushed off, but they in the process came up against all of these machines and said, ooh, we can use this to our advantage, as we fight back, and then eventually get pushed off our homeworld where we can take that technology with us. That's really rad.
Yeah. I think that's a really cool idea. And I really love the visuals of like encountering like a Neogi starbase or something that's just covered in webs drifting out in the void. Yeah,
totally. So let's see if there's any other questions we can have answered. So we're leaning more into the spideriness of them. Do we think that maybe they have insect style eyes where they're like segmented and sort of built differently than human eyes, or do we want to have them more like an animal system?
Like if I remember correctly, like spiders generally have like 8 eyes.
Yes.
And like most of them are just basically simple photoreceptors. Like they can perceive light and dark, and that's about it. Which gives them good situational awareness, but they don't have like a clear view except for like the forward facing eyes, which tend to be like their hunter eyes, as it were.
Right. And they also they can have sensors on them that are meant for like air movement, which is, they look like hair. They're not exactly like hair because maybe they are. Hair's kind of chitinous. But
is that like their urticating hairs, or is that
something like
else?
that? I forget. We neither of us are spider biologists, and so we're bound to get some of this stuff wrong.
I mean, I did have a big fascination with spiders as a child.
Okay, then I'll bow to your.
I don't know if that's what they're called, but I do remember urticating hairs being a thing, and tarantulas could kick them at you if they were irritated. Like throwing darts.
Oh yeah, no, they're actually. Oh yeah, caterpillars have those too. Those are like create irritants though. Those are like an actual weapon. They're not a sense organ. That's cool. Well, since their ships are basically like made out of the same material they are, you could imagine that they actually have like they could have that on their ship, and it could be something that sort of gets fired out or like sends out clouds.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Like chaff clouds of urticating hairs, or
that cause like get in people's lungs and stuff. Dermatitis. Yeah. Let's look up spider senses. Not spider sense. This isn't.
Oh, now you're looking at Spider-Man.
Spider sense organs. That's what I want.
Sure. Yeah.
Don't they have like taste receptors on their legs too?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Man, spiders are freaking gross. Close-up pictures of spiders. Oh yeah, they have the ability to like feel through the web, like if things are moving around and stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they'll basically set up like tripwires or something with some threads,
or even like using it for like a ship-wide intercom. You can like everybody who's on the web, you can jiggle it to cause like to communicate. Like you can like the same way that sound waves pass through air. Their version of sound waves could pass through the web.
It is basically like that tin can on a string.
Exactly like the tin can on a string. In fact, in that way, maybe they're not used to communicating without that connection, So if you take a Neogi out of its web, then it becomes like feels like it's not like part of the world anymore.
Interesting, yeah.
That could be an interesting like way that they view the universe around them, is like there are things that are part of the webs and things that are not part of the web, and like
that could even go with kind of like the world kind of assuming that they're very like territorial. Is like for them to like have an understanding and feel like a place is something that they can interact with, like they have to cover it in their webs. They have to basically incorporate it into their territory. And while they think it's like, oh, they're just claiming territory, they're carving out space. They're like basically trying to carve a space where they can live and feel comfortable.
They're trying to. It's almost the same thing. Settling and exploring are the same thing for them. Yeah. Because like to understand a place, they have to settle it and build a home there. Basically, That's very cool. I wonder if you could also give them webs that act like fiber optic cables so that they like can move light through their ships,
Ooh, interesting.
So you'd have like these glowing webs, or like have them the ability to like channel light into the centers where it would otherwise be dark.
I mean, I think that's not without precedent. Like I know spiders have basically like the sticky web and the non-sticky web. And like they built their webs out of like interchangeable portions of that, and they just kind of know which is which.
Yeah. They might have a large number of like even greater number of different kinds of webs too, like ones that transmit that carry light for fiber optic like energy transmission or something like that. Maybe they even have, if this is still a D&D world, maybe they even have like special magic interacting webs that like interact with ley lines and like can capture energies that are magical energies that are sent at them. Like literally you could throw a spell at them and it could hit a defense web and get absorbed by it because it's got magical web passed through it, and then they can bring that into the center of their ship to power it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that'd be rad. And maybe that like their version of spellcasting might be the same sort of ideas. Like they're taking energy that they've stored within the ship, within the web, and like they literally like make a rune out of their web, and that like causes the spell effects to happen, stuff like that.
Or they've got like they just like hurl these balls of like arcane charged webs.
Yeah, they absolutely could. Like they could channel it all into a sack that gets like hurled out. In fact, they've got because the web is so elastic, they get to absolutely just slingshot it at you, which is kind of ridiculous looking, but awesome.
Have you seen like the I think it's like fishing spiders, or maybe I'm thinking of like ogre spiders? Like they'll basically fashion a net that they will use.
There's also the bolo spiders, which like make a line with a weight at the end of it that they can then fling around, like they like a whip, basically.
Oh, that's awesome.
That they can use to entangle stuff. Yeah.
Imagine they're doing that with like asteroids.
Yes, absolutely. Man, I wonder if they could. Spider silk is stronger than steel. Maybe they can make themselves a space elevator.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Or even better, there's an idea called the skyhook, which it's similarly weird as a space elevator, except it's not tethered to the ground. It like loops end over end of itself while orbiting a body, and with enough precision of your orbital mechanics, you can have like one end of it rendezvous with a ship that's coming up, and then it transfers momentum to get them further up. And it's a interesting idea that may get us cheap orbital transport just by literally having it get yanked upward by momentum, basically.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things where on Earth it probably will be very difficult to do, but you could absolutely do something like that on the moon or Mars or something like that.
Low atmosphere planets.
Yeah. Or really just ones that don't have a huge amount of gravity on them.
Gotcha.
Space elevators are absolutely a thing you could do on Mars, I think. Like with steel. Like you don't even need like carbon nanotubes. Like Mars is just small enough that you don't need to worry too much about it.
That's cool.
But I do love the idea of like, when they take over a solar system, they build like space elevators and like huge webs that go from, a planet out to the asteroids around them and stuff. That's pretty cool.
Like you definitely get an idea of what you're getting into when you come into Neogi controlled territory.
And literally they could just like, they can be on the surface of a planet and they can literally just climb anywhere into the solar system that they want. That's rad. That's awesome. Rad. They might even be able to, you could do some cool stuff if you were able to build superstructures like that, probably use exploiting differences of pressure between two ends of a tube and stuff like that. You could probably get it to power, like create power and stuff like that. Or moving material from one planet to another by like basically building a big ass tube that goes between them and then like pumping it there. So you could like pump atmosphere from your high atmosphere planets to your low atmosphere planets just with like a big pipe that you made out of silk. Oh my God, they could make an inflatable flailing arm tube man.
That's the main takeaway of the Neogi.
Yep. That's we were going all of this distance just to get us to the incredible flailing arm, flailing tube man.
Just to sell used vehicles.
Man, and you don't want to buy a Neogi ship, man. Nobody else can run those things.
Yeah. Nobody else wants to run them.
Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty rad. What is there any other? So we haven't talked really about their culture much at all.
Yeah.
Because they're insectoid. My instinct is to say like, oh, well, they're like a hive mind or like they're a colony structure or something like that, which I'm not sure that that's the low hanging fruit. I feel like we need to be a little more creative than that. I definitely like the idea that they are dealing with the idea of things being both in and out of the web,
Yeah.
Maybe it's one of those things where like my UPS, which I just replaced the batteries on, is now giving its battery alert again.
Oh no. Well, if it makes you feeling better, I can't hear it.
Yeah, it still probably shows up on the recording, but so we'll just give it a sec. Probably will clear the alert the next time it does its power a self test, which it may not have done yet. Hopefully it's not that the batteries I just got are dead. Because
that would suck.
Yeah, that would be annoying. But like I bought them from a reasonable retailer, so come on, you need to finish up so that I can keep going. And Pretty Boy is so tired now that everybody left. Like he just collapsed and like went into he did the perfect circle dog, or like butt, nose right to butt, and like just like passed out.
He's a good.
But I did kick him out of the office before we started recording. So it's still going. There we go. All right.
Excellent.
What were we talking about? Culture.
Yes.
Neogi culture. Something like maybe we had in their original version they have like this whole idea of ownership. Mm-hmm. Like I do like the idea that they are making the web because that's how they perceive the world, but maybe they feel like nobody really owns the webs that they build. Mm-hmm. Like or they're communally owned by all Neogi, so like the idea that
they're big fans of net neutrality.
We're going to move on from that. And so you could have that idea rather than like every single item in the world being owned. It's like they view all things that are Neogi like possessions to be similarly possessed by all of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where they're not, but like nonetheless, they also view like once we own it, like all of us own it. Like, that could be kind of cool. That puts them, that does give them a reason to be at odds with other species where like they'll take over a planet and then be like, yeah, we own this now. This is ours to do with whatever the we want with.
Yeah.
And so they're going to start like terraforming planets and things. Like they're going to start doing massive changes without respecting people. So they are a problem when they get in there, but it's because of like their worldview that like, well, if we build a web on it, then it's ours. Yeah. That's that could be cool. There's a whole section on here of Neogi gods, which is kind of cool. I also do like the fact that they are they're without gender, and so they might be like, it might be one of those things where like they don't understand it in other creatures, but then like, I love the idea of them like, what's the word? Like appropriating it, like the way that like other, like the white people appropriate everything on our world, that like the Neogi are like, okay, so we don't really understand this, but we're totally going to start like using it anyway. And so like
they're space spider weebs.
Yeah. But like, they take on some of the trappings of gender expression from humans, but then like do it wrong. But then there isn't really a way to do it wrong. So they're just kind of doing it in a way that humans would not expect them to do. Mm-hmm. And then here's the best part. And then telling the humans they're doing it wrong because they like, no, you're like, that's the best version of it where they're like, no, you shouldn't be like, no, obviously the females are the ones with the beards. This is important, and then like trying to correct humans when like on their pronouns for themselves.
Oh gosh.
I like that. That's a real way to make a villain species, is just have them misgender absolutely everyone they come across.
Just combining all the triggers, arachnophobia.
Yeah.
Ugh. Well, now we can see why they're universally hated.
Yeah. I like the idea that they're universally hated, not because they're super evil, but because they're just assholes. They don't respect other people's property rights or their pronouns, and they like to correct them all the time. They will actually everybody. Well, actually, you'll find.
Just pushing up the bridge on 4 pairs of spectacles simultaneously.
Yes. They wear fedoras and call everybody "milady," even when they're not ladies.
Well, we know they're building mech kits in their basement, so
exactly, yeah, they get the gun plug going and everything. They're you open up all of the RPG supplements and they have the mall ninja shit in the weapons section where it's like swords that have a sword at both ends and like they have all the extra hooks and stuff, and that's all the stuff that Neogis have commissioned to have shipped out to them and stuff.
We know for a fact that they're involuntarily celibate.
Okay, I think we created an interesting version of them and now have ruined them. So I think we're done with Neogis now.
That is the life cycle of practically all our creatures.
All right, just turned them into internet weebs. All right. Well, in that case, bye.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Monster Mechanics. If you have an idea for something that we should cover on our show, or just something you want to sling at us, like a compliment or a criticism or even a correction, head on over to our Twitter, which is twitter.com/monstermpod. Now for the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, and hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. All the ideas generated during this podcast are released under a do what the f*** you want public license.